Okay, guys. So, first off, I wanted to talk about you as a person. And that doesn't mean that only special people are meant to be web developers or software engineers or front end developers or whatever. It just means that there are some things you have to think about. It doesn't mean you have to be a math genius, it doesn't mean you have to be a computer nerd or whatever. But one thing you must have is a passion for web development. And unfortunately, there's no real easy way to figure that out other than it's great that you want to do it, but a lot of people want to do it because, especially because now it's hip and trendy. And then they get into it and they realize it takes some effort to learn it, to do it. Uh, there's a lot of trial and error, a lot of trial and error. And then people get into it and they realize that it's not for them. And that's fine. But I think one important thing to keep in mind is that you have to have a passion for websites and development. That doesn't mean you have to be a design freak or a super nerd focused on data structures and things like that. Although that helps, but so number one is you have to have a passion about it, and I'm going to go over some resources that you can kind of go to and do some things, some trial runs of learning to code, etc., where you can figure out if it's for you, and we'll go over that later. Number two is that you don't need math skills. Very little. Basic addition and subtraction, and maybe some percentages is good enough. I'm the worst person in the world for math, but I know addition and subtraction just about enough to get me through, and that's really the majority of what you need. Okay. And the third thing I think that is most important that for me, I didn't realize that I cared about it, is problem solving skills. Basically, a customer, a client, or your manager, or whatever, or your project manager comes to you and says, we need this. How can you do it? And that doesn't just mean, oh, what algorithm do I need? It could also mean, do I want to use Firebase as a back end? Do I want to create would it make more sense for me to create the back end myself, using Node or Python or whatever? Or should I use Bootstrap or Material UI, or should I create my own custom CSS, etc.? Sorry about that. Um, so just things like that, problem solvers. And yes, algorithms um, play a part in that, obviously. But I think it's important to note that, uh, you know, just thinking about a problem, and the more experience you have, the better you're going to be at that, especially if it's in one technology over the other. This is a website that I found, 21 Best Online Problem Solving and Games for Activities for Groups. I thought, it just gives you games and things like that to sort of, quiz you on your problem solving abilities. I will leave this in the description below. It's just something that I thought was really cool, and it's pretty much for free, so you can check it out. All right, that's it. Let's move on to the next section. Okay, guys, so for the next section, the next thing you're going to need, besides passion and a drive, is a computer and internet connection. You're going to need some form of machine, some form of computer, whether it be a laptop or desktop, it doesn't matter. Um, and of course, there's a bunch of options. I'll give you the standard. Now, there is something called Linux, but in the beginning, we have Apple or iOS, obviously. I'm sure you're familiar with it. We have Microsoft PCs. This is just Dell. Um, and I know these can get pricey and everything like that, but keep in mind, and I'm not a big computer guy. Like, as long as the thing works and it doesn't lag and take you forever to do something, then it's good enough for me. I mean, the more powerful, the better. But if it's just a simple $200 laptop, and they have those, then that's good enough. I would not suggest using your phone. I would not suggest using a tablet, etc. It's just doesn't have the sort of capabilities that you need. It doesn't have a terminal, things like that, or a command prompt. Um, that you need. So these are, Apple, Dell. There's also Linux, although I'm not familiar with that. Uh, there are ways, possibly, don't quote me on that, there are possibly ways to get free laptops. There's a lot of charity groups out there if you're in a country where, it's difficult to get one. Um, here's a website, and I realize if you don't have a laptop, how are you going to search on a website? You could go to an internet cafe or something like that and go to this website. I will put this link in the description, and hopefully it can lead you on your way. The next thing you're going to need is an internet connection. Now, if you were to start coding and run, say, HTML, CSS, and JavaScript on your computer, you technically don't need a internet connection for that. But if you want to start uploading websites and files and things like that, if you want to start downloading packages like from NPM for React or Node or wherever, to download Node in general, you're going to need an internet connection. And hopefully you can get one. It's, obviously everybody needs it. If not, here's a good article for how to get free internet access, or at least low cost. So hopefully that can help you out, and I will leave that in the description below. So that's a computer and an internet connection is obviously, and I'm sure you probably already knew this, is something that's vital. You can't work without it, really. I suppose you could do whiteboard problems, but I mean, that'll only get you so far. Okay? Let's go on to the next one. Okay, guys, so for this next section of the next thing you're going to need to get started in web development is a code editor, something to type out code and to also possibly run your code on your local machine or your local computer and in a dev environment. And of course, the creme de la creme, the best of the best, in my opinion, and a lot of others' professional opinions, is VS Code or Visual Studio Code, which is contained here, code.visualstudio.com. You download it for either Windows or Mac or Linux, it doesn't matter. And it just has so many features that you can have, including extensions where you can install them. Let's see. Live server, where you can run, right here, live server, where you can run your project with JavaScript, PHP, all functionality. Oh, I'm sorry, not PHP. Sorry, you can't run PHP. But there is PHP live server, HTML live server, but this live server is the more common one. There's also prettier things like these extensions. Prettier code formatter, basically it formats your code and puts in indentations where necessary whenever you save your project, so you don't have to do that manually. Super helpful. Let's see, React, stuff for React, Angular, React Native. This one, ES7 React Redux GraphQL, React Native snippets that just help you type out code faster. And there's just so many. It's just, in my opinion, this is the best. There's also one, brackets, I think it's called. No, brackets. I forget what it is. Subtle match brackets, where they match up your JavaScript brackets. Our next option, second, but certainly not much far behind VS Code, is Atom Text Editor. Again, for Windows, Mac, or Linux. Very similar. I'll show you what it looks like. Let me just open it. It basically runs similar. It's a code editor. It has color coordinated div sections, etc. You add your project folders, save. This also has an Atom Live server, so you can run your code, your front end code, directly from Atom Live server. So certainly nothing wrong with that. But I would go with VS Code. And both of these, by the way, VS Code and Atom Live Server, are free. There is one other option which I have never used, and I don't suggest you use it, but you can also, if you're on Windows, you can use Notepad. Technically, you can type out code in here and it will work. You can't run it, you can't do anything, there's no features, but you can technically type out code here, although in this day and age, why would you bother? So also, one thing you need to do is get familiar with your command line. Now that for Mac, that's terminal, which it comes standard on your machine or your computer. And for Windows, which is what I have here, is your command prompt, and you can type in things, you know, and whatever, right? Spit code. Uh, but you're going to be using this, especially if you're deploying apps to Firebase or React or whatever, or Node. This is where you're going to go. So familiarize yourself with that. All right, on to the next one, the good stuff. Thanks for sticking in there, coding sources. All right, guys, so for our next section, we're talking about coding sources. So you have your passion, you have your machine or a computer, you have your code editor. You're all ready to, with your fingertips, to start typing. What do you start typing? Well, that's a good question. So, what I like, what I used a lot in the beginning, just because I felt that it was easy to understand and easy to sort of reference, was this w3schools.com, and I'll leave that in the description below. A lot of the gurus out there, they're not really gurus, they're just jerks, but a lot of the gurus out there, and Brad Traversy agrees with me, W3 Schools is a good source. It won't answer all your questions and it's not magic, but it is a good source for a quick reference, right? If you want to reference something like an HTML element, it's just a quick reference where you can see, oh, what's the tag for making something bold or important or whatever. And it's got CSS, JavaScript, SQL. It's even got Python now. It didn't used to. It's got PHP, Bootstrap, how-tos, CSS, Java. It even has jQuery. It even has React. And it just gives you the real basics of everything. And in my opinion, this is where you should start. If you've never typed a line of code, go here and go through these things. Pick out what you want, HTML, CSS, whatever. Excuse me, and go through this. The JavaScript. It's got pretty much, I would say, everything you need to know. Right, and you can start playing around with it and practicing. It even has, let's see, it even has when you go into one of these, it has a little thing where you can try it and you can run some code here. And you can you can type it here, run it, and then it'll run over here. So that's really great. So please start with that, W3 Schools, and you'll be good. The next one, when you start getting a little bit more on, and you want to take on functionality in your front end in your browser, JavaScript, this developer.mozilla.org, and again, I'll put that in the description, the link. Go here. This is everything you need to know about JavaScript. This is JavaScript here. It even breaks it up into intermediate and advanced and complete beginners, JavaScript basics. It gives you examples, and it allows you to type the code right in there. It even has React and Vue, Svelte, and all that. Getting started with React. Everything JavaScript is here. If you need to reference something, or you have a question, or you're in the middle of a project and you need to look at something, come here. And again, I'll put that in the description. Next one, you already know it. You're there right now if you're watching this video, is YouTube. Lot of great channels. My favorite one, I'm sure you know him. Brad Traversy, Traversy Media. He's just got so much, and for me, I feel like here he is. For me, I feel like, I'm in America, so I feel like he explains it in a way that I can understand. But a lot of coding channels do, and sometimes you can even just type in, how to make Firebase React project. You could just treat it like Google and just type in, you'll come up with a bunch. Fireship.io is another great one. There's just so many. Okay, so YouTube. And it's a visual thing of someone explaining how to do it, much like my channel. So please subscribe. Thank you. Our next one that I wanted to talk about to sort of help you along the way is number one, Google. Uh, I do this all the time. If I have something where I'm like, a simple calculation or refactoring or something, or somewhere where a quick algorithm, how to find the lowest percentage of, a string or something. Excuse me. I come to Google. And even more than Google is Stack Overflow. You've probably heard of it. Believe it or not, they have jobs and all types of stuff here, but of course, we want it for the code answering questions, which I forget. Believe it or not, they got jobs and companies and stuff, which is great. But how to find lowest number in an array. Oh, shut up. All right, never mind. Let's see. Let's go into Google. How to find lowest number in an array, JavaScript. And there you go. Stack Overflow will most likely be your number one thing. Sometimes it's easier just to go to Google, and guaranteed Stack Overflow will at least be the top result, if not the first couple. And here you go. So this is the question. This is the person that asked the question. I generally read this, but not a lot. If I think it's close, I just go straight down to the answer. And as you can see, people vote if the answer is good or not. If you have a very specific problem, it can be tough to find answers here. But if it's a general thing, like something like how to find the smallest value in an array of JavaScript, boom, you can basically just copy and paste this. But you can't do that with everything, so keep that in mind. Our next resource is freecodecamp.org. So basically, it's free, and they give you, it's basically like a coding boot camp. So like I was talking about in the beginning, if you're not sure about coding, if you think it's interesting but you've never done it before, and before you make any huge commitments to schools or other coding boot camps or anything like that, I would suggest going here and doing this, right? Put in a couple hours a night, 1 hour a night even, 3 or 4 times a week or whatever, and see if, make it all the way through, right? And if you do, then by all means move on. But I would suggest starting here because this is free. They do have paid options, but in the for basic usership, it's free. There's a lot of good options in there, and they have a lot. They have React, Python, etc. Everything. The next coding resource you're going to want to know is GitHub. This is mine. I would suggest signing up for an account. Even if you're not uploading files, that's fine. You absolutely don't have to, but at some point you're going to want to upload some, especially for your portfolio. If you can't afford a domain name or hosting services, then at least you can have your code up on GitHub. And a lot of times you could also host your files on GitHub and then deploy your website or React app through Netlify. So this is it. I would suggest right in the beginning, make a GitHub. Even if you don't touch it for a few weeks or whatever, fine. And there's some other coding sources. For example, like each language has their own website. This is for php.net. It's a little confusing, especially for beginners. I would suggest doing a few tutorials, like especially with Python or PHP or MySQL or anything like that, before diving into the documentation, because it can be a little confusing at first, but it's definitely a great resource, documentation here, and it kind of breaks stuff down a little bit. The other one is NPM if you're on the React side or Node or something like that. You could say, you could search for a package. NodeMon, pretty popular package with Node on the back end. And you can see weekly downloads is over 3 million, so it's pretty reliable. What you want is something that has a good documentation source and a good backup of support, so that if something goes wrong, that they'll fix it and you can move on. Listen, there's a lot more, guys, but I would say these are just some, and I'll put these all in the description to get you started. Again, this is for complete beginners. Okay, guys, so our last section here is services that you can use just to help you out in the beginning, especially the first 3 months, maybe up to, maybe even into the first 6 months. Just some things that can help you out and things that I still use today. Number one is Firebase. So what Firebase is a backend as a service, a BAAS. Basically, it takes care of it has storage for files. It has storage for data like JSON. It has authentication that makes, it stores all the usernames, everything in the back end. So the only thing you have to do is the front end, like React or Angular or whatever. Really convenient. It also has hosting. It also has notifications. It's huge. It has a ton of stuff. It does cost. You do have to pay for it, but only up to a certain point. After you get a certain amount of read writes per month, it costs. But to launch an app, and you don't pay until the app starts taking off. So it hosts your app. If you come up with a really good idea, if you come up with the next Instagram or TikTok, you build it on here, and if nothing happens with it, then you never pay. But if it takes off, then you pay. Just a really good source. You don't have to concern yourself with learning the back end. You don't have to learn Node. You don't have to learn Python. None of that. Just basic JavaScript, HTML, and CSS, and React if necessary. You don't need React, but sometimes that helps. And I do have a couple of videos on Firebase on how to get started with using it, so check my channel for those. I did those within the last couple of weeks. Our next one is Netlify. Now this is sort of kind of similar to Firebase, but not exactly. So, but what I use it for, or used it for in the beginning, is basically it can host a website. So instead of paying GoDaddy for a shared server, meaning your website will be up with 1,000 other websites and it could be slow, you can go here and you can host your Netlify will host the files for you. It'll give you a URL. It won't be pretty, but it'll be a URL for your portfolio, for projects, etc. And I have a video on that, on how to host things on Netlify. So check out my channel for that. So you go to GitHub, basically, so you go to GitHub, you upload your files to GitHub, and then you sync it up. You create an account with Netlify. I would suggest doing that right away, or not right away, but within the first 3 months. And then you can host. It can host HTML, CSS, JavaScript, web applications. It can host. It can even host React apps. Okay, no backend stuff. It can't host a Node bot or server. Okay, it can't do that. But there is something that can, which is Heroku. This can host your full stack application if you did Node, PHP, Python, Ruby on Rails, Node, like I said. This can host it. And again, just like Firebase, it doesn't charge until you start using it a lot. So if you have a lot of users, it won't charge you until then. But it's basically for free. Especially it's great for demo projects and stuff like that. So if you're just getting started, try Heroku and deploy to Heroku. The documentation is great, really simple, really easy. They take care of a lot of things for you. Our last one, again, so just to be clear, Firebase and Netlify are front end. If you're a front end developer, go with Firebase and Netlify. End of story. If you want to do back end stuff with a focus on back end, Heroku and this one, MongoDB.com, is your source. So what MongoDB is, it is a cloud-based, as you can see, global multi-cloud database. This is where you store your mostly JSON, a lot of things, but mostly JSON. So you create an account, and it gives you a cluster, which is basically your database, and then you can have storage. And again, it charges you per read and write. So if you get a lot of users and it becomes very popular, then they'll start charging you. But there's a huge area of where they don't charge you, so it's basically free. It is free. Same with Heroku, same with Netlify, same with Firebase. So in my opinion, go with these guys. Again, front end is Netlify and Firebase, back end Heroku and MongoDB database. Okay, Heroku is for hosting your app. MongoDB is for storage, saving data and things like that. Guys, I sincerely hope that helped you. I hope I gave you some good resources. And again, I will put everything that I talked about, all these tabs. By the way, if you're going to be a web developer, familiarize yourself with having a shit ton of tabs open, because that's just the way it works. So, yeah. Again, I will put all these links down in the description below. And so hopefully this helped. Again, if you have any follow-up questions, please leave them in the comments below. If you liked this video, if you found it helpful, please hit the thumbs up, and please subscribe to my channel. I appreciate it, guys. Thank you. Take care. See you later.